CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories back together to fight climate change. China and the United States release a joint statement on what are seen as small but important steps. China's President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden arrive in San Francisco for a critical leaders summit aiming to stabilise ties between the world's two largest economies. Our other headlines: Israeli forces penetrate Gaza's biggest hospital and what they claim is a command centre for Hamas. And the UK government's plan to send asylum seekers to Rwanda is held below the waterline and ruled unlawful. China and the United States have released a joint statement saying they will back a new global renewables target and work together on methane and plastic pollution. The statement says the two sides agreed to revive a climate working group to discuss cooperation, though differences remain on issues like phasing out fossil fuels. The climate deal comes just ahead of the leaders' meeting between President Xi Jinping and Joe Biden at the gathering of Asia-Pacific economies in San Francisco. Well, let's talk to our correspondent, Jung Chung-ying, watching events from Beijing. Chung-ying, what can we expect from this Xi-Biden meeting?
Well, thank you. For the first time, as you just reported, for the first time in a year, Chinese President Xi Jinping and the U.S. President Joe Biden will meet face-to-face this Wednesday. And this is expected to be a substantive meeting, and they're expected to spend a considerable amount of time with each other, hashing out through a number of issues that are crucial for both countries and consequently for the entire world. For example, on China's side, there's anticipation that Beijing will urge the United States to lift Trump-era tariffs and roll back export controls on technology, including the chip export ban and the restrictions on Chinese companies that are listed on the entity list. And President Xi is also scheduled to attend a dinner hosted by the U.S.-China Business Council and the National Committee on U.S.-China relations. And on the U.S. side, there are reports of a desire to resume a military-to-military dialogue, which was halted after then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in August 2022. And as you just reported, there have already been progress announced on climate cooperation following the meeting between the two countries' special climate envoys last week in Southern California. And according to some of the experts that I've spoken to, the meeting itself is a sign that both countries want to turn things around. Let's not forget that looking back through the past few months, the United States has been leading that push since this summer. Blinken and several other members of Biden's cabinet have traveled to China to restart engagement with China. And also for China, Foreign Minister Wang Yi and other senior Chinese officials have also visited the United States in recent months. And President Xi himself even signaled a change in tone when he said that there are 1,000 reasons to make China-U.S. relations work well. So while the outcome of these discussions remains uncertain, the meeting is expected to hopefully foster more stability in the bilateral relationship between the world's two largest economies and hopefully prevent its further deterioration.
Chung-ying, thank you for that.
To you.
Thank you very much indeed. Our correspondent, Jung Chung-ying in Beijing. Well, it's almost a year since the two leaders last met in Bali at the G20. Robin Dwyer explains how China-US diplomacy has evolved since then.
The last time Presidents Xi and Biden met was last November in Bali on the sidelines of the G20 summit. They haven't spoken since. But despite years of rising political tensions, diplomatic activity resumed in earnest this year with the aim of paving the way for the two leaders to meet again. In June, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken went to Beijing for talks with President Xi and senior diplomat Wang Yi. Just a few weeks later, US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was there for a 4-day getting-to-know-you session with China's new top economics team, a visit she called constructive. In August, it was the turn of US Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. She credited her trip to China as helping to open the lines of communication between the world's top two economies. Last month, Wang Yi made a rare visit to the White House for more talks with Blinken. He said relations between the two countries were at a critical crossroads and that lessons could be learned from the twists and turns over the past year. It's perhaps in fighting climate change where the United States and China can find most common ground. This month, China's climate envoy Xie Zhenhua met his US counterpart John Kerry in California to find ways to cooperate. This was their second face-to-face meeting this year. Also this month, Janet Yellen held 2 days of high-level meetings in San Francisco with China's Vice Premier He Lifeng, where she said the US has no desire to decouple from the United States.
Well, Jeff Moon is a former assistant US trade representative for China.
APEC is a unique organization. It is a consensus-driven organization. It is not a decision-oriented organization. It comes together and brings together not only government people, but private business people. And I participated in it both as an official and as a private businessman. And I found it very useful because it provides an informal venue where those people can get to know each other and can have a free flow of ideas as they try to find ways to improve the conditions within the region.
With the confirmation of the meeting between President Biden and President Xi Jinping, how do you think that might change US-China relations?
Well, I think the meeting is crucial. China suspended many bilateral contacts and dialogues in the wake of Speaker Pelosi's visit to Taiwan in August of 2022. In November of 2022, Presidents Biden and Xi agreed at Bali that they would take steps to stabilize relations. And those steps have now been taken through a series of very choreographed visits. So China is now indicating that it wants to start or restart relations in all fields. And I think that process is going to begin and be formalized at the meeting between Presidents Biden and Xi. So it's very important that they get together and that they tell their countries and their officials to let's get working again.
Both China and the United States have expressed their shared interest in trying to prevent the escalation of the Israel-Hamas conflict. Is that going to change anything? Is anyone really listening to the world's two superpowers?
I think they are, but let's be honest here. The Middle East conflict has been going on for decades, and we have been unable to reach a solution through all that period. What the superpowers can do, though, is exercise whatever influence they have in the region to get the parties to moderate their behavior and to get to negotiating to try to find some kind of a settlement. In the case of China, China has good relations with Iran, which is the sponsor of many of the factions that are at play in the current conflict. And China could play an important role by trying to moderate Iran's behavior and trying to nudge Iran into trying to be more accommodating and find some kind of solution.
Okay, what would a good APEC outcome look like? What are your expectations of the outcomes of the APEC gathering?
Well, I think that there are, as I said, it's a voluntary organization. Everything is done by consensus. There are a number of things that are on the table. The theme this year is inclusion and regional development. I think there could be agreements to implement voluntary programs on things like energy cooperation, perhaps on the environment and other issues that are of regional concern. But as I said, in my personal experience, the real value is the networking between the leaders and the other participants that are there. And that builds a regional community that going forward can really be a recipe for success.
Israeli troops have entered Gaza's biggest hospital in a high-risk operation that it claims is targeting a Hamas command center. Witnesses report seeing soldiers looking through rooms within the Al-Shifa hospital, while a doctor said staff were sheltering after hearing gunfire. Hamas has denied using the complex as cover for its operations and called this raid a war crime, but Israeli troops say they have found terrorist infrastructure.
Based on intelligence information and an operational necessity, IDF forces are carrying out a precise and targeted operation against Hamas in a specified area in the Shifa hospital. The IDF is conducting a ground operation in Gaza to defeat Hamas and rescue our hostages. Israel is at war with Hamas, not with the civilians in Gaza.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent in Gaza, Noor Harazin. Noor, what's the latest you're hearing on the situation at the Al-Shifa hospital?
Well, Ashraf Al-Qudra, who is the spokesperson and also the director of the Al-Shifa hospital, said in his latest statement that the Al-Shifa hospital smells of death. He was explaining the situation in the hospital, the current situation. He first said that the Israeli invasion began at between 2 and 3 a.m. this morning, and the Israeli troops in tank entered the hospital. They shot and destroyed at least 5 buildings inside the Al-Shifa hospital. At the same time, they arrested around 200 people from those who are taking shelter, like men that came with their families, and they are taking shelter inside the hospital. They arrested 200 of them, and they took them to an unknown place. For now, what is happening now inside the Al-Shifa hospital? Ashraf Al-Qudra said that the Israeli forces basically locked them inside units and rooms, some patients with some doctors. They cannot move in or out from these rooms. If they move around, they will be shut down. And he also added that the situation is deteriorating because actually they cannot even treat those injured who they are stuck with them in the room because they cannot reach the pharmacy, they cannot reach the equipment. So this is the situation inside the Al-Shifa hospital for now.
And away from Al-Shifa hospital, Israeli strikes continue across Gaza.
Well, yes, since the early hours of this morning, the Israeli warplanes targeted several places actually in Gaza, in northern Gaza, and specifically in Jabalia refugee camp. They targeted several residential homes and also a group of Palestinians that were standing in a line basically to fill some water for their homes, and a number of people were killed in that incident, mostly are children. At the same time, the Israeli warplanes carried several attacks here in southern Gaza, where I am standing inside Deir al-Balah hospital of Shuhada al-Aqsa. An Israeli strike on Al-Nusayrat refugee camp where 26 Palestinians were killed. Most of them are children and women again. Also another Israeli strike in Deir al-Balah, which is also in southern Gaza, and a number of people were killed and injured. This is what we are witnessing here on the ground. A big number actually of deaths between Palestinian children and also women. According to the latest numbers coming from the Palestinian Health Ministry, they said that 11,320 Palestinians were killed. Among them are 4,650 children.
Noor, thank you for that. Our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. Well, Israel's military says it's found weapons during its raid on Al-Shifa hospital. Let's talk to our correspondent Stephanie Freed in Tel Aviv. Stephanie, Hamas has denied that its headquarters are beneath this hospital, but Israel rejecting that.
Right, and Jamie, actually, I just wanted to clarify. I'm about half a kilometer from the Gaza area. You'll probably hear some outgoing artillery while I'm talking. So I'm not in Tel Aviv today. Let's see. What we're getting from the Israeli side is the fighting's been going on. Israel operation moving into Al Shifa Hospital since 2 a.m. local time. So what you're looking at is 14 hours or so now of Israeli soldiers, Israeli forces going in. You know, we heard the Israel military spokesperson say that this is a precise operation. And analysts here are saying, I mean, to counter some of what we heard from Gaza and the claims there that are coming from the Hamas-controlled health ministry, which is they're countering and asking intelligence and analysts, why would troops enter a hospital? What would be their motive unless they're going after what Israel says, which has been established by the international intelligence community, by the White House, also by Israel's intelligence community, which are operatives, weapons, underground tunnels to clear out. As well, there was word that there possibly could be hostages that are being held in the hospital, underneath the hospital. Israel has said, and we've seen the images, that they have offered, and they've been talking to the directors of Al Shifa Hospital, the physicians, trying to coordinate incubators, or coordinating incubators coming in, generators coming in, fuel coming in to operate. Because as Israel has said, or the Israeli military and officials have said, their aim is certainly not civilians inside of a hospital, just in terms of how that would come across. Israel doesn't want that sort of the bad imagery. It looks bad enough for soldiers to go into a hospital. We also understand that some of the soldiers that are going in, they are Arabic speakers, some of them, to be able to communicate with the people that are inside of the hospitals. They are telling Hamas operatives they're finding inside to surrender. And as you said, they also say they're finding weapons. The latest that we have in terms of news vis-a-vis the hostages, there are reports coming out that Hamas has said they would agree to release 50 of the hostages that are being held inside of Gaza for a 3-day pause in the fighting and for an exchange of Palestinian women and some minors. Not confirmed yet, but that's the latest. We've been hearing talk of a possible hostage release for days. And this is the latest that we're hearing, that Qatar has brokered something possibly. We'll see, Jamie.
Stephanie, thank you for that. Our correspondent Stephanie Fried in Tel Aviv. Well, as Stephanie was suggesting, that a truck carrying fuel has entered Gaza for the first time since the start of this conflict. The truck carrying fuel has entered Gaza for the first time, and the delivery, we understand, of diesel crossed from Egypt after Israel gave approval. The fuel is reportedly destined for United Nations aid distribution trucks and not hospitals. No fuel supplies had been allowed into Gaza since Israel imposed a complete blockade of the enclave. The initial delivery of 24,000 litres is due to be carried out over the next couple of days. A military spokesperson for Yemen's Houthi movement has confirmed it's launched a series of ballistic missiles against targets in Israel. Israel said it had used its Arrow aerial defense system to intercept a missile near the Red Sea after air raid sirens were heard in the port city of Eilat. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, where at London's Supreme Court as judges ruled that the UK's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda is unlawful.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty. The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Israeli forces penetrate Gaza's biggest hospital and what they claim is a command center for Hamas. Our other headlines: back together to fight climate change. China and the United States release a joint statement on what are seen as small but important steps. And China's President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden arrive in San Francisco for a critical leaders summit aiming to stabilize ties between the two largest economies in the world. It was the UK government's plan to deter asylum seekers from journeying in small boats across the English Channel, but Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's plans to send asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing is now somewhat holed below the waterline after judges ruled the policy is unlawful. The British Supreme Court rejected the government's appeal because it said Rwanda could not be considered a safe third country. Our correspondent Paul Hawkins is outside London Supreme Court. Paul, just how significant is this ruling?
Hugely significant, Jamie. This was one of Rishi Sunak's government's flagship policies, one of his top 5 priorities for this year. And don't forget, we're in the run-up to a general election in the UK in the next year. One of his top policies was to stop those boats that you've referred to by deterring people from making the crossing because they may be deported to Rwanda, where they would have their asylum application processed over there. Effectively a one-way ticket to Rwanda, and then they would live out their days in Rwanda providing their asylum application was approved. Now, the UK Supreme Court, in their ruling today, they said that the principle of sending asylum seekers to a third country, that's fine, but it's about whether it's safe enough to send those asylum seekers there and whether the UK would be breaking its legal obligations under the European Convention of Human Rights and under the UN Refugee Convention to make sure that those people that it sent to that third country, in this case Rwanda, wouldn't then be deported back to the country where they came from, which would break the UK's legal obligations. And in his ruling, Lord Justice Robert Reid, he cited at least 100 cases since that agreement was signed, that memorandum of understanding between the UK and Rwanda, where that had actually happened. And so he said that Rwanda's human rights record wasn't good enough, that there weren't enough assurances given by the UK government for the plan to be legal. This was what the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak had to say about the ruling earlier today.
This morning also the Supreme Court gave a judgment on the Rwanda plan. They confirmed that the principle of removing asylum seekers to a safe third country is lawful. There are further elements that they want additional certainty on, and noted that changes can be delivered in the future to address those issues. The government has been working already on a new treaty with Rwanda, and we will finalise that in light of today's judgment. And furthermore, if necessary, I am prepared to revisit our domestic legal framework.
So what does the UK government do after this?
Well, as you heard there in that clip, Rishi Sunak has said that they are working on a treaty with Rwanda. Remember, there was the agreement between the UK and Rwanda at the moment is a memorandum of understanding. A treaty, it is hoped, at least the government lawyers hope, would then give themselves immunity from having to go through legal challenges such as this one. So I put that to the lawyer representing the small number of asylum seekers in this case earlier today, and I asked him whether, if that were to happen, if a treaty were to come into force, would he still have a job in terms of representing his clients and legally challenging that treaty?
Because of what the Supreme Court has said about the evidence and the real risk on removal to Rwanda.
Okay.
And critically what they've said about the Rwanda government failing to adhere to treaties they've already signed up to.
Okay, that is still, those treaties can still be legally challenged through the courts.
The decision to remove people to Rwanda off the back of a treaty as opposed to a policy, based on the Supreme Court's judgment, I would argue would still be very much challengeable, yes.
So that's one option that they are looking at, bringing in a treaty. They could also change UK domestic law, but that would take time. Given there's a general election within a year, that looks unlikely. They could even do a treaty with a different third-party country, one that could give those assurances that would make it legally watertight. What we are seeing in terms of here in the UK, though, now, is that this issue is going to tear apart Rishi Sunak's Conservative Party. We've already had the Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party saying, look, the government should just break the law and just send the planes to Rwanda. Look at how that contrasts with the Home Secretary, otherwise known as the Interior Minister, who today in the Commons said that if people want to know the government's position, they should listen to government ministers.
Paul, thank you for that. Our correspondent Paul Hawkins outside London's Supreme Court. The former Rwandan doctor has gone on trial in France accused of committing genocide during Rwanda's 1994 massacres. 68-year-old Sosthene Maumna denies the charges, insisting he tried to shield members of the Tutsi community in office. Nearly 70 witnesses are due to give evidence over the next 5 weeks. France has issued an arrest warrant for Syria's President Assad over the use of banned chemical weapons. It refers to crimes against humanity and complicity in war crimes for the attacks against Syrians in 2013, which killed more than 1,000 people. The Syrian government has denied ever using chemical weapons. The Syrian presidency and information ministry has not commented. The prospect of creating oxygen on Mars has moved a step closer. An artificial intelligence robot developed by researchers in China has come up with a solution. The process, which involves studying meteorites from Mars, would have taken a human researcher 2,000 years. But the AI chemist was able to crunch it in less than 5 hours. The headlines again, back together to fight climate change. China and the United States release a joint statement on what are seen as small but important steps. China's President Xi Jinping and US President Joe Biden arrive in San Francisco for a critical leaders summit aiming to stabilize ties between the world's two largest economies. And Israeli forces penetrate Gaza's biggest hospital and what they claim is a command center for Hamas. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.